Welcome, Chosen X. You wake into a subtle rearrangement of ordinary life, as if gravity has tilted toward a different star. A small but steady rhythm centers itself under your ribs, and everything that once felt urgent softens into perspective. What first arrives is a change in how time keeps you. Minutes stretch and compress around decisions so that choices reveal their true cost. You notice negligible details becoming salient: a neighbor's tone, a misplaced receipt, the precise way light gathers on a window. These are not coincidences but measurements made by a world that answers to refined presence. In places where you once sought approval, silence now asks for evidence of alignment. You are learning to test belonging by resonance rather than by habit. People drift toward you when their inner weather matches your steadiness, and they withdraw when their storms cannot proceed in shared space. This separation is neither accolade nor exile, but a clearing necessary for clearer work. Within you a ledger quietly tallies choices that spared your integrity. Those small refusals and patient investments compound into conditions that invite opportunity, not by vanity but by preparedness. Doors open not because you marketed yourself but because you sustained practices that the world can now trust. Support travels along channels beneath public sight. Mentors, patrons, and connectors arrive from unexpected disciplines because they recognize the same inner signatures you cultivated alone: restraint, curiosity, and consistent care. Gratitude becomes practical stewardship. You hold resources with a sense of duty and translate favors into structures that benefit more than one life. Your judgment grows precise because it has been tempered by hard lessons. You offer advice that carries consequence because it is earned, not declared. Old voices will attempt to reclaim you through regret and accusation. Treat these echoes with the same charity you afford to seasons. Let some testimonies close and allow others to reopen with new context. Declining certain invitations will be an exercise in preservation rather than refusal. Saying no is a skill as exact as saying yes. Perception sharpens. You spot patterns ahead of their arrival and read intention in brief gestures. This foresight is not vanity but a cultivated faculty of attention that gives you tactical clarity. Remain humble as it grows. Memory of former errors will keep arrogance at bay and make your direction reliable. An unseen web of allies moves quietly to align stairs and bridges for you. Those who construct passageways do not need your resume. They sense your readiness and tune steps to your stride. When recognition arrives from improbable sources, accept it as confirmation of unseen labor, not as validation of ego. Manage influence with the temperament of a steward. The tasks ahead will require care that transcends quick triumphs. Discipline of detail, fidelity to promises, and patience with process will amplify the benevolence you can wield. This chapter is preparation, not finish. Tend the small practices that enlarge capacity: punctuality, thoughtful speech, and deliberate rest. Your life becomes a vessel that can carry more than personal comfort. Let your actions form patterns others can follow without direct instruction. You are neither spectacle nor sovereign. You are an example whose quiet consistency reshapes what people assume is possible. When you move through public rooms, do so with the composed certainty of someone who honors the labor beneath success. Insist on integrity as the baseline for any collaboration and observe how systems will adjust around necessity. Keep your attention on the next meaningful task, not on premature crowns. Your influence will compound as you steward opportunity responsibly and refuse shortcuts that erode long-term outcomes. Carry these truths with tenderness. Be responsible with brightness so that others can approach without fear. Speak plainly, move without theatrics, and steward what is entrusted to you like a borrowed map that guides future travelers home. In the daily practice of these modest virtues you will find evidence that the change within you is transforming the world around you. There will be moments when the world does not reflect who you have become, and in those times patience will be strategy rather than mere endurance. Keep attention on essentials, decline shortcuts that trade depth for applause. Your contribution compounds and benefits others. Practices you keep become paths people will follow. Picture your discipline as lanterns placed along a dark road so later travelers move without stumbling. Let the trials you passed shape safer routes rather than harden resentment. Humility does not equal timidity. Move with calm authority that respects consequence and ethics. In private, Tend the durable parts of your life and let that tending steady you when public pace quickens. Remember who taught you to begin again. An unusual dawn arrives without fanfare, the city exhales differently and you notice how familiar rhythms ask for new measures. Inhabitants who once reflected your gestures now misalign, faces you relied upon look away because their maps did not include this route. Strangers who learn about you from distant channels perceive contours your nearest companions fail to recognize. Accept this observation as an invitation rather than injury. You have entered a corridor where proximity distorts and distance clarifies. People who shared your table may continue to insist on yesterday as though nothing profound has shifted. Listen to their reports but do not let them redraw your borders. Many will try to compress your growth into labels that they understand. Refuse those compressions with gentle firmness. Maintain that softness while keeping necessary limits so your development does not become their convenience. There will be occasions when voices you love trade curiosity for critique, and their words will sting because they carry expectation. When someone you trusted names disappointment, name instead the work you completed and the evidence you collected. Offer consolation for their bewilderment and decline re-entry into patterns that once diminished you. Compassion toward others does not require surrender of your emerging frame. Boundaries are not walls, they are careful decisions that guard capacity for future care. Distance will teach you an odd mercy. Observers spared by daily friction often notice gifts obscured by intimacy. You will receive recognition from remote witnesses who offer perspective uncolored by routine exhaustion. Treat such acknowledgments as useful counsel, not as remedies for the absent approval you once sought. Devote energy to forming alliances that match the scale of what you steward rather than the nostalgia of past ties. Small phenomena will begin to cluster around your movement. A light may hesitate in a room when truth is voiced, as though objects remember and register fidelity. A song will stitch itself differently to memory after a moment of integrity. These occurrences are not demands to perform but confirmations that alignment is gaining coherence. Use them for navigation and not for spectacle. Beware the lure of expedience disguised as opportunity. Quick attention in crowded places often trades lasting infrastructure for immediate applause. Choose architecture over applause. Favor systems that augment rather than appropriate your labor. When offers arrive that require you to compress values into a headline, decline until structures reflect the gravity of your aims. Your capacity to steward resources will grow through disciplined refusals as much as through strategic acceptance. Practice a language that calms rather than inflames. In private, cultivate phrases that steady the pulse so reactive moments do not dismantle steadiness. Write brief notes that translate confusion into tasks you can complete within a day. Rituals composed of simple repetitions will anchor decision-making when noise rises. A short pause before responding will preserve clarity and prevent regret. The ache of being misunderstood will visit often. Do not hide from that ache, let it instruct tenderness rather than harden resolve into bitterness. Record evidence of your contributions and hold these records as inventory of truth. When misreading persists, inquire about the missing proofs and supply them without inflating your story. Transform resentment into strategy and let integrity guide response. Rearrange commitments with intention. Some partnerships will no longer belong on the same shelf because the distances between missions became asymmetric. Release with respect and without dramatics. Tending the exit is a moral exercise as much as entering. Curate the rooms you inhabit so that they amplify focus rather than scatter attention. Remain faithful to small obligations. Consistency in modest tasks constructs a foundation that rumors cannot unsettle. Finish what you start because completed work accrues trust beyond persuasion. Collective recognition follows durable contribution and not the speed of rumor. When the public conversation about you moves faster than your patience allows, do not respond out of fear. Allow the narrative wind to blow while you tend the fire that sustains it. A calm metronome outlasts storm-driven noise. Finally, note that reconciliation can coexist with recalibration. You may sit at tables again with people who once failed to see, provided evidence of change exists and accountability is mutual. Keep receiving the world with discernment, allow grateful visitors while guarding against those who would traffic in your history without repair. Carry these lessons gently and carry them like a map that points toward more precise horizons. Trust the slow clarifications. They will convert confusion into corridors of service and transform solitary proof into a public instrument for collective good. By the time you learn to read the quiet map, the sky has already traced reckonings in pale light. Gestures you thought ephemeral keep a stubborn memory. The smallest favors you offered while believing no one watched have become markers that guide how doors swing and which tables set places for you. A patient archive stores each choice and each neglect. It behaves like a gravity of consequence, pulling later opportunities toward those who tended their work without publicity. You begin to perceive an unseen lattice running beneath ordinary streets, an architecture of reciprocity stitched from discretion and care. Through this frame, introductions travel with intent. A single recommendation moves with the weight of a settled promise. People who invested without spectacle discover that networks open where readiness meets need. Those who dismissed your seasons find their routes narrowing as practical obstacles accumulate around misplaced certainties. This is not a spectacle but a system. The world adjusts by reassigning access where fidelity has been shown. Someone who stood beside you in early mornings now sits with the awkward heat of regret. Their memory repeats moments when they chose convenience over accompaniment. They count silences and call them omissions. You watch their recalculation without indulgence. Your attention bends toward repair only when sincerity presents itself with concrete change. Accountability must carry the architecture of reparation, not the theater of apology. Signals arrive from quarters that once felt impossibly distant. An earnest message, a careful phone call, a discreet request to consult the surface and demand reasoned attention. These contacts are not random collisions. They are arranged ones seated by people whose vantage allowed them to recognize patterns without proximity blurring judgment. You accept offers that withstand scrutiny and decline those that compress your values into shallow slogans. Every acceptance is a test of alignment, not of ego. Corrections appear as pragmatic limitations for some and as widened avenues for others. A failing partnership slows because its foundation reveals brittle assumptions. Resources retreat from places that relied on optics instead of craft. Meanwhile, structures that honored the process receive funding, seats at tables, and quiet stewardship. These shifts do not occur as theatrical triumphs. They are adjustments in allocation of responsibility where merit has been demonstrated through patient labor. You make lists in private, not as instruments for vengeance but as inventory for trust. These notes map who kept promises when outcomes were small and who spoke up when your work was still invisible. The map reorients your commitments and helps you reassemble teams around steady practices rather than old loyalties. Distance had clarified some people and proximity obscured others. That insight becomes tactical. It turns disappointment into a tool for building communities that can carry scope and time. A network of advocates forms behind the scenes. They are not fans in robes but makers of opportunity. They draft proposals, they make introductions with context, they route invitations where usefulness meets character. These actors prefer the back rooms and quiet emails to public acclamation. Their interventions are precise and often mundane, a mentor's careful note, a referral that includes a full brief, a board member willing to read more deeply. When these currents find you ready, projects that once stalled accelerate and stewardship becomes possible. You steward these openings with hands trained by thrift and fidelity. You refuse vanity that dilutes purpose. Each new responsibility arrives like a vessel that must be held steady. Your reputation becomes a ledger that others consult to assess whether entrusting you is prudent. That ledger is composed of completed tasks, preserved integrity, and consistent tending. It buys you latitude and assigns consequences in the same breath. One figure particularly feels the weight of missed presence. They revisit your early exchanges and see their own small refusals refracted into consequences. This realization sits heavy, but it does not prompt spectacle from you. You honor your own thresholds and invite restoration only when repair is accompanied by changed practice and accountability that protects the work you have grown. The moral of this chapter is practical rather than mystical. The world accrues equity for the patient and reallocates access according to fidelity. Quiet generosity plants seeds that later produce structural openings, not simply applause. Keep tending the modest duties that compound into trust. When the ledger rebalances, move with stewardship. Let gratitude and firmness guide distributions so the gains you receive can be invested into lives and systems that multiply integrity. In that precise stewardship and move on. You carry a quiet heat that refines rather than burns, like a smith tempering steel with measured flame. In this season your center radiates steadiness that aligns instruments and calms competing currents. The change you embody is less a spectacle than a slow crystallization of habits, choices, and refusals that cohere into an inner authority both kind and exacting. People sense the shift before they find words, rooms reorganize around presence and priority. Your decisions gain proportion. Small acts begin to yield larger outcomes because you have learned to rate cost and consequence with uncommon clarity. You do not pursue impact, you prepare for it. Private work becomes scaffolding for public responsibility because your practices are honest and repeatable. That scaffolding bears weight when the world measures discipline, not display. Accept offers that extend capacity and decline those that compress values into headlines. Authority now arrives from attention and fidelity rather than from titles or applause. Your voice affects consequence not by volume but by steadiness. When you speak, environments do not merely listen, they shift, as if tuned by reliability. Stewardship is required. Offers that promise quick ascent at the expense of erosion must be refused. Preservation of character is a strategic choice, not a sentimental one. Resilience acquires shape. Where once held you upright, design now directs pressure. You build margins so generosity does not exhaust resources. Boundaries open for aligned people and close for those who traffic in distraction. This kind of discernment is not coldness but loyalty to purpose. You learn when to give and when to withhold so that your energy funds future responsibility. Your influence works by invitation. Tone and timing are calibrated so others can inhabit your space without losing themselves. This temperament attracts collaborators who are makers rather than admirers. They favor long builds over viral flares. Together you design projects that prioritize craft and durably useful outcomes. Early signs may be subtle but compound into notable reach. Tend the inner compass. Regularly audit motive, accept inconvenient feedback, and revise plans when warranted. Let integrity be the operating system for decisions. When mistakes occur, repair swiftly in ways that preserve trust and protect those affected. Balancing transparency with discretion is a mark of seasoned leadership. Develop influence by training others. Identify apprentices whose formation matters more than immediate yield and teach them practices that resist shortcuts. Your legacy will be institutions that reproduce good work, not trophies that collect dust. Build frameworks that persist beyond your presence and cultivate successors who respect the structure. Guard against ease disguised as captivity. Do not mistake comfort for completion. Maintain appetite for growth and set problems that expand capacity. Invite critique from those who speak truth without agenda. Establish rituals that renew your ability to lead as regular maintenance rather than reactive fixes. Both applause and correction will test you. Practice accepting both with equanimity because each expands your capacity for fair stewardship. When pressure increases, return to the routines that steady you, consistent sleep, deliberate language, reconciliations that clear friction, and solitude that restores strategy. These are instruments of longevity. As influence becomes structural, it will alter systems you touch. Some sectors will quicken, others will close. Do not read every contraction as failure. Assess sustainability and prune what cannot endure so that resources shift toward emergent priorities. Finally, regard power as responsibility conferred by history and not as a prize to hoard. Use authority to enlarge dignity, to convert access into opportunity, and to widen the field of possibility. In doing so you honor those who prepared you and pay forward the quiet service that forged this flame. Expect reckonings from those who once stood beside you. One will revisit choices and see how small absences reshaped their course. Their remorse is not yours to carry. Allow repair only when accountability yields change. Let consequences follow behavior, not slogans. At institutional scale, resistance will rise as new standards displace old metrics. Traditional measures will not register steady craft or patient service. Translate steadiness into operational clarity so teams can follow a map. Set evaluation routines favoring fidelity over show and thresholds that protect mission. Create records, onboarding practices, and financial habits that outlast personalities. Train successors to value durable systems over quick applause. These structures will bend systems toward broader access and open lanes for those blocked. Hold tension between compassion and rigor so generosity is sustainable and fairness endures. Keep the flame with care and humility now. You stand at a threshold that carries winter memory and the tide of a new season, and you recognize this shift as an invitation to stewardship rather than as a token to consume. Quiet practices that shaped you in private now require public fidelity. This is not sudden coronation but the consequence of habits forged in hours of patience. What reaches you is responsibility shaped by fidelity, not spectacle. The world will test whether abundance can be governed with restraint and justice. Answer with structures that protect what you steward and make generosity sustainable across seasons. Let your influence grow like well-engineered infrastructure instead of trending spectacle. Teach the next circle how to preserve craft, refuse shortcuts, and treat trust as currency. When you open a door, imagine who will pass through and whether that person can carry what they inherit. Receiving provision is only the first duty. Allocating it with attention so resources circulate is your ongoing work. Some people will return with softened words and the same old habits. Accept repair when it arrives with real change and practical accountability. Hold compassion and firmness in the same hand. Protect the field you cultivate so tenderness does not become a vulnerability exploited by those who favor immediacy over integrity. Expect ordinary routines to become instruments of meaning. Private rituals scale into shared disciplines that steady teams and orient projects toward integrity. Accurate records, clear onboarding, and repeatable habits are not administrative chores but ways you bless people who follow. Small actions finished well compound into an inheritance broader than any single accolade. Your clarity will sharpen. You will read motive and capacity before positions are announced. Use that perception to place people where they can grow responsibly. Resist rewarding spectacle and instead honor sustained craft and relational intelligence. The frameworks you design now determine whether momentum becomes a movement. Stories about you will change because systems respond to fidelity. Do not pursue public vindication in every revision. Treat changed narratives as signs that access is being realigned with care demonstrated over time. Use moments of recognition to teach humility and to model how elevation can be stewarded without concentrating privilege. Opportunities will come dressed as many things. Some will require sacrifice of core routines for speed. Others will expand capacity while preserving the practices that prepared you. If an invitation asks you to trade endurance for applause, decline. If a path allows you to construct durable scaffolding, step through and design the systems that sustain expansion. Remember the unseen hands that tended what you were growing without applause. Share credit, open seats, and rebuild pipelines so labor can scale. Allocate resources to mentorship, governance, and training so influence does not centralize. Measure success by dignity extended rather than trophies amassed. As the work widens, make your language precise. Translate values into documents, rituals, and accountable practices so ambiguity cannot be weaponized. Clarity produces accountability, accountability produces trust. This is how influence becomes institutions and how institutions become generous by design. The horizon before you is both invitation and stewardship. The gains that arrive are not rewards to hoard but tasks to arrange with humility. To carry this transmission further, watch the video that appears in the center of your screen. It deepens these teachings with visual demonstration and presents 3 practical frameworks you can apply now: a stewardship grid for equitable allocation, a mentorship map to scale capacity, and a decision rubric to protect routine while enabling growth. If this guidance lands with you, subscribe so subsequent sessions arrive directly in your feed and enable notifications to be alerted when new materials appear. The visual session continues the instruction with concrete demonstrations you can apply immediately. You will see a stewardship grid that helps you allocate funds and labor with metrics that prioritize longevity and dignity. A mentorship map shows how to scale training without diluting standards, and a decision rubric gives clear tests to accept or decline opportunities based on whether they preserve core routines. The session also introduces the fundamentals for a quiet cohort that practices accountability, shares templates, and tests these frameworks in real time so good work is reproducible. This is not a pitch, it is a practical continuation of a conversation about how influence can be organized ethically and durably. Click the video and let the demonstration expand what these words began. If you value depth, subscribe, enable notifications, and invite those ready to steward.